Hey, I did something stupid. I hosted a game jam, and I competed against people who were using game engines. I've hosted other game jams in the past, and in every single one of them, I've come last. All because I wasn't good enough to make these games work. The way I see things, the whole point of making a game engine is to eventually make games. So if I can't compete with people who are using game engines, then what's the point? I know that I am at a giant disadvantage when it comes to other game engines, but I still want to try. The last game jam I hosted, I submitted a spinning triangle. Of course, I was robbed of a victory in this case, and came last yet again. So this is my attempt to finally not come last. I run a small community of game developers, and they wanted to run a game jam. And I have one rule with game jams. If enough people want to take part in a game jam, I have to run one, even if I'm personally not ready. So I set up the Breaker Game Jam, with the theme being Lost, and it being 3 weeks long. Everyone seemed to be hyped, I had some great ideas, and everyone was ready to dive in. My idea is that you'd be a lost soul stuck in this limbo area, and you'd float around looking for lost pieces of yourself. Once you collected all the lost pieces of your soul, you'd become complete and be able to leave, therefore winning the game. So my plan starting out for these 3 weeks were to implement everything to do with mesh shading. Mesh shading is a completely different rendering path, meaning that I would have to implement a whole different rendering path just for mesh shading, as the graphics pipeline is very different from the traditional pipeline I had been using up until this point. This was going to have meshlet occluding, automatic LOD, view frustum culling, and meshlet backface culling, all while having a compute shader path to do mesh-based occlusion culling and non-automatic LOD, along with the view frustum culling for graphics cards that don't support mesh shading. Then I was going to add a library that handled physics, implement that, then build up the entities that I was going to use in the game. Finally, then I would have the small task of building the game, which would include implementing extra light sources, so you could actually find the things you needed to pick up. And once that's all done, I would add the game logic so the game would actually run. And I would do this all while working full-time as a software engineer, and never having done anything like mesh shading before. What could possibly go wrong?
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
So I spent 2 days in the game jam getting things to compile, and I thought it would likely take 5 more days to finish everything to do with mesh shading. I would spend the next week getting all the physics to work, and then the final week adding all the game logic. So day 3 began with a lot of confidence to fix all these bugs, and day 4 was the same. Day 5 was the same. Day 6, day 7, day 8, day 9, and so on. But my engine just kept crashing. I had this really cool idea that I would show you day by day all the new features I was adding in this video. But that would have been really boring, because for 2.5 weeks straight, I was stuck on validation issues and straight up crashes in my engine. That's right. As anyone with experience would have guessed, I seriously overestimated my abilities. In those 2.5 weeks, I only managed to get one feature working, and that was the occlusion culling with meshlets. This only works in Vulkan 1.2 and completely messes up textures. If you have a look at this model, you can see that all the textures are messed up. If I turn on and off meshlets, it becomes incredibly obvious. And for those who don't know, a meshlet is a new type of primitive used in mesh shading. It's just a small group of triangles that are part of a bigger mesh. There are many issues with this mesh shader implementation. The main one being I was using a draw ID inside the mesh shader, while using a multi-indirect draw call. This is fine if you're not using a task shader on top of your mesh shader, which drives work to the mesh shader. A task shader's job is to filter out meshlets, so the mesh shader has to do less work. Meaning when I used a big buffer with all the data in, with the multi-indirect draw calls, the index point, which is the draw ID, gets lost in the mesh shader. This is because the task shader filters out meshlets, therefore filtering out mesh shaders. the mesh shader can't read the index point of this buffer anymore, because the one-to-one relationship with the buffer and the mesh shader have been disturbed. At the time, I had no idea what was going on or even how to fix this. I'll hopefully, when everything's fixed, explain in more details how this all works. When I started this, I had no idea what I was getting into. Mesh shading requires you to think completely differently about how graphics works. It entirely replaces the geometry side of the graphics pipeline, so no vertex shaders, nothing. This means that the Vulkan code has to be different as well. And these mesh and task shaders are closer to compute shaders now. Trying to implement all these things in 3 weeks with basically no experience was a big mistake, even if I was working on this full time. The remaining days were a complete panic. I was just trying to get things working at this point. I didn't want to submit nothing. So because mesh shaders weren't even working, I had to turn them off. I spent 1 day trying to get the physics library to work, realized I didn't have enough time, then I noticed I had to get my game engine to work on other people's computers. So in a mad rush, I got something uploaded to the game jam, which was completely broken for a few hours for everyone. But after that, it worked. This is what I ended up submitting. You basically float around in this place, and that's it. You can download this tech demo for yourself at my itch.io page and give it a go. Note, this sadly only works on Windows. Honestly, if you guys try it, I'd be surprised if it works on your computer. I've only spent 1 day in a mad panic trying to get this to work. But if you don't want to run this game, don't worry about it. There isn't much to see anyway. The whole thing was really rushed. But people in the game jam, believe it or not, seem to like it. I actually came 4th out of 6, which is amazing. I didn't expect anyone to like my game, honestly. Before I continue, I want to give a shout out to the guy who came in 1st place, my friend Dev, with his Lost Ship game, which he made in GameMaker and is completely playable on the web browser. He said that the theme and the time constraints gave him a new perspective on game mechanics and how to test them. He likely wouldn't have completed the project if it wasn't under the constraints of a game jam. He liked the fact that the game came together very quickly once he figured out how to rotate the ships. Overall, he said he's happy with how things turned out. There are 4 other games worth checking out on the Game Jam page if you're interested. Most of them are playable in the web browser. This game jam for me personally didn't go well. Although I was happy that I achieved my original goal of not coming last, I was deeply disappointed with how things went, how I ended up rushing things, and the final game itself. I actually didn't want to make games for a week after this game jam, because I felt like a complete failure and a fraud. I felt so bad I couldn't face making this video at the time. It was terrible. I really wanted to show everyone mesh shading techniques, because I think they're really cool, but I wasn't able to. I realized later on though, that failure is just part of the process. And since then, I've been grinding every day, learning more, and developing my understanding of graphics, Vulkan, and mesh shading. I've started to fix things in my own engine finally. So things are looking up, and soon enough, I'll be able to show everyone how much mesh shading is a game changer for graphics programming. So finally, I would like to say thank you to everyone who's been watching my videos, who's stuck around, and is still here even though I haven't been posting much recently. Reaching 1,000 subscribers is huge for me. I still remember being shocked that I had 40 subscribers. I've also decided to stop putting pressure on myself to make highly technical videos. I still want to make these type of videos, but sometimes I just want to upload a video that's less technical, and trying to exclusively make highly technical videos has stopped me from posting, all because I didn't have new technology to talk about in a video. I'm not trying to make it as a big content creator on YouTube. I'd rather just be a straight game developer. So that being said, if it doesn't work out, so be it. I'm still going to make stuff regardless. So hopefully the next game jam doesn't go so bad, but we'll see. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.